here? Yeah. You get over here. Come over here, Heather. Come over here. Tom, why don't you come over here, right here? Come over here. That's good. That's good. That's good.
Right here?
Yeah. All right, well, we're ready to get started. John, why don't you get the door there? All right, come on in close. My name's Jeff Anderson, and I am one of the lawyers that stand here today with three very courageous survivors whose truth needs to be shared and known. They'll each introduce themselves to you when they speak and choose to speak here today. And we are here because today we released what we call now the Anderson Report that pertains to the Diocese of Brooklyn. And in it, we have identified 200 clerics, 200 clerics, 200 priests, nuns, and clerics that have worked in the Diocese of Brooklyn, who have been publicly accused of child sexual abuse, assault. And we release their names in this report. We also release the histories of where they've been assigned and where they have worked over the years as clerics, as priests. Because it's time for the communities of faith and the communities in New York, and particularly the Diocese of Brooklyn and the bishops and top officials in it, to come clean with the full truth, not a half-truth. And our excavation of these 200 names and these 200 histories is based on public documents and the information already released by the Catholic bishop in the Diocese of Brooklyn. The problem is the information that they've released is that there were 112 who they have deemed to be credibly accused. That doesn't make it. If we've discerned there are 200 that have been publicly accused, how many more are there? And only the Catholic bishops and the Diocese of Brooklyn can really know how many more have come forward who they chose not to believe, and who have remained hidden in secret to this day. Tom Davis, one of the survivors who stands with us here today, is one of those who came forward and reported the assault by his then priest in the 70s to the Diocese of Brooklyn. And the Diocese of Brooklyn, the bishop and his board, chose not to believe him. How many more have they chosen not to believe? How many reports have been made that have been suppressed and unrevealed? And so today we're doing our best, armed with the courage of these survivors and the technology we have, to release the Anderson Report. In this, there are 144 diocesan priests, that is, priests who are entered into the diocese by the presiding bishops. In this, there are 24 religious order priests, that is, priests from outside the geography of the diocese, who have never before been publicly named largely, and some brothers and some nuns as well. what's really significant is that much of the information that we're releasing today has not been released before. In addition to the releasing of this report, we filed this morning 10 separate lawsuits against the Diocese of Brooklyn, in which there are 3 additional offenders whose names have never ever been publicly disclosed by anybody before today. But from and on the benefit of the survivors that have come forward to us, most recently under the Child Victims Act, we were able to get those names, investigate their claims confidentially, and then discern their truth to be credible, and as a result, named those individuals using anonymous identifiers for the survivors as does, and identifying 3 new offenders in the 10 cases filed today against the Diocese of Brooklyn. And to those survivors that have come forward, we express deep gratitude. And to the survivors who are finding that voice and sharing it with us as we excavate and disclose this information that the public needs to know. We express deep gratitude to all the survivors and their courage who come to us and whose privacy we can protect and do. But today we stand with 3 survivors who have chosen to use their name and speak to the gravity of this problem. And when we look at the list that we released in the Anderson list of the 200 publicly accused clerics that have worked in the Diocese of Brooklyn, you see that many are dead. Many are no longer assigned. Many seem to be a problem of the past. But the past is the same problem as in the present, because there are at least six of these individuals of the 200 that are still in various stages of active ministry. Some retired, some unassigned, but one in particularly alarming. And so I want to have Tom Davis step forward and address that because he is emblematic of a practice that deeply concerns us here in the Diocese of Brooklyn, and that is to keep reported offenders in ministry. And the offender I'm talking about here is Monsignor Otto Garcia, G-A-R-C-I-A, right here. And I'm going to ask you, Tom Davis, to step forward here, introduce yourself, and tell us what folks need to know about what Otto Garcia did to you and how that was handled.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Davis, and I was molested by Father Otto Garcia when I was a child, back in the 70s. I lived with that for over 45 years of never telling anybody. He was able to pick me out as a prime victim because my parents were very involved in the church, and I didn't think anybody would believe me. And I never said anything until after my parents passed. And when they did, I actually called Jeff Anderson, and I wanted him out of ministry. The Catholic Church basically had an investigation.
At that time, you brought the information forward to the Diocese of Brooklyn that Otto Garcia had abused you, had assaulted you while you're priest as a child in the 1970s. You told him, and you reported it to him, right?
Absolutely, and I gave details too, many details. The investigation took 2 days, so it wasn't a cursory investigation.
That's
This
him
is
right
him.
there.
And of course, they asked me to pick him out of a lineup, and I already described him before I picked him out of the lineup. But it was basically swept under the rug. They did nothing. They said it was unsubstantiated. And I said, how can people that are committing crimes in the dark be substantiated? And I filed 2 months ago, Jeff Anderson filed a lawsuit on behalf of me against Otto Garcia and the Diocese of Brooklyn. And I just want to say, anybody else out there, it's not too late to step forward. Stand up to these monsters like I have, please. And, you know, yes.
Tom, I want you to know how grateful we are for the courage you've demonstrated. You knew when you came to us, we could preserve your name and identify you only in this lawsuit or in the suit that you brought as a John Doe and protect your privacy throughout this process. But you chose to stand up and use your name, didn't you?
That is correct. That is correct.
And we want to thank you for revealing this to us, because as we speak, here's what folks need to know about Otto Garcia. He is a top official of the Diocese of Brooklyn. He has been a top official in the Diocese of Brooklyn for many, many years, working under 3 different bishops, not just the current. Well, you also need to know that he's a canon lawyer. He was a former chancellor, which is a top official, and he's also a vicar general, which is a top official. And as a vicar general for the bishops, he also was the guy designated by the bishop to get the reports of childhood sexual abuse made to the diocese. He was the guy that was also required to investigate them, and was the guy that made a choice to find most of the reports made to him and the bishop unsubstantiated. Just like they found Tom Davis's claim against him to be unsubstantiated. Once Tom Davis came forward, another survivor, because Tom Davis did share that secret, did use his name and appear with us publicly, another survivor of Otto Garcia, Monsignor Otto Garcia, has come forward, on whose behalf we have brought suit, identifying him as a John Doe. Here's what's additionally alarming. Otto Garcia had been identified already by reason of the way he handled this for the Catholic Bishop of Brooklyn by one of the nuns and several of the nuns who made reports about how it was being handled. And one of the nuns has already publicly reported that 3 different abusers were reported to Garcia by her and some other sisters. None of them were removed. And Otto Garcia, as the right hand to the Catholic bishop in Brooklyn, helped hide that very fact. As a matter of fact, he is identified by those reporters on behalf of the Catholic bishop as the fixer. He was called the Michael Cohen of the Diocese of Brooklyn. We share this information with deep sorrow and great alarm. And why so much alarm? Because Monsignor Otto Garcia was at Joan of Arc in 2018, assigned by the bishop to work in ministry at the Church of St. Teresa's in Woodside, New Jersey. He is there now as pastor, saying Mass. And we had somebody there on Monday to document that he's still active and openly there working, and the choice made by the bishop is to keep him there as parochial vicar. That's like a big shot. And with the pastor, and here is the Church of St. Teresa Bulletin in Woodside, dated September 1st. He was saying Mass this last Sunday. He was saying Mass this last Monday. And he's operating with full faculties without anybody being told by the bishop. This guy has been accused, and the diocese has been sued twice, naming Otto Garcia, Monsignor Otto Garcia, as an offender. So we thank you, Tom Davis, because you're here today to do what has to be done to protect kids in the future. This is a dangerous practice. That's a dangerous man, and there are 199 other folks who are identifying here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Tom, come on over here. Bishop, please. It's time. Get them out. Get them out now. And any other offenders who have been accused by the courageous survivors that have come forward that you know about, and who are the subject of the suits that we brought today, 10 in number, do the right thing. It's time. It's past time. In the list of 200, there's another name that deserves to be shared, and standing with us is a courageous survivor who has already identified that priest who was ordained and brought in as a priest in the Diocese of Brooklyn many years ago. And that priest brought into the Diocese of Brooklyn, who worked in Brooklyn for many years, ultimately rose through the ranks to become a bishop in Pittsburgh, ultimately to become and appointed by the Holy See to be an archbishop, and then to become a cardinal archbishop in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. And it's Cardinal Archbishop Anthony Bevilacqua. And he is on this list. And he appears right over here. Move over there, Tom. And this is Anthony Bevilacqua. He is now deceased. Anthony Bevilacqua is now deceased. But the legacy now of his abuse of this survivor who stands with us today, and the choices he made as the bishop in Pittsburgh and then as the Archbishop Cardinal in Philadelphia, became now well known through 3 grand jury reports in Pennsylvania. And each of those 3 grand jury reports identified Cardinal Archbishop Bevilacqua as a mastermind of concealing and hiding offenders for decades. And had he not been died, he was publicly identified as somebody who would have been indicted for his dangerous practices as a bishop and as a cardinal archbishop in Philadelphia. So standing with us today is a courageous survivor, Heather Taylor, who will come forward to identify who she is and why she stands with us today. Heather, come on forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Taylor, and I am here today to inform the public that I was sexually assaulted by then Anthony Bishop Bevilacqua upon my confirmation when I was 9 years old.
And Heather, we are deeply sorry you have to stand with us, but we're grateful that you made the choice to. And you had previously identified him, but today you stand publicly with us so folks can know about the practices, not just in Brooklyn, but here is a picture of Anthony Bevilacqua as the then bishop in Pittsburgh at a pre-confirmation picture with, is that you?
That is me.
And that is Heather as a young person, and it was Anthony Bevilacqua that has been named in a suit brought by Heather Taylor. So I want to say to you, Heather, how grateful we are for you to be with us today. As you come from your home in the West Coast to have this painful truth known and be a part of revealing the 200 who need to be publicly revealed and the histories that need to be known so that the proper actions can be taken and kids can be protected. And that's why you came forward.
That is correct. I'm here to advocate for each and every one or individual out there that still needs something to be said. They need to come forward and inform the right people and the right person so they get justice served.
Okay. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bridie Farrell, you please step forward. Bridie Farrell has been a powerful advocate, advocating for the Child Victims Act, a survivor for some time, and has become well acquainted what has now become the Child Victims Act that gives survivors an opportunity to come forward anonymously and privately and identify the offender that offended them or the institution that also made conscious choices to protect those offenders and take action in a way they never have before. So Bridie Farrell, as you stand with us today, what is it you want us to know about the law and the reason we stand together today?
Hi everyone, my name is Bridie Farrell. I, like so many others, or even 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. When I was 15, I was repeatedly molested by my then 33-year-old teammate, Andy Gable, 4-time Olympian, Olympic silver medalist. When Andy stopped speed skating, he went on to be the president of USA Speed Skating. He ran SLOC, the Salt Lake Olympic Committee. And I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my siblings. I didn't tell any coaches. I certainly didn't have anyone to call. And 16 years after the abuse, I went back in the skating rink and realized it's the same. And the point of telling you so much of my story is that we're here today, we're talking about members of the Roman Catholic Church, but this is not a church issue or an attack on Catholicism or the church at all. The same reason I came forward was to make speed skating safer, and that is the same reason why you could hear in someone's like Heather Taylor's voice of why she's coming forward with our most horrific stories. This year in New York State, we passed the Child Victims Act, which allows myself, who was abused in New York State, to come forward. And we have the opportunity now to file a suit against both the people who abused us and any of the institutions that allowed that to happen. And when we ask people to come forward, we are by no means asking anyone to stand in front of a microphone or in front of a camera, in front of your community even. What we're saying is pick up the phone. There's people finally that are willing to help us. There's people that will guide us through this process. There are attorneys that are willing to help us. That there are people that are trauma-informed that are going to make this better for us. And the point is that we as a survivor community have to unite to let other people know that it's time. It's time we all stand up. It's time we all come forward with our truth. And I recognize it's not easy, but I encourage anyone that can relate to our story to really consider calling and coming forward with your story.
Thank you, Bridie Farrell, and your story of not being able to talk about what was done to you by an adult who had power over you mirrors the story that you just shared with us, Heather, because you're now 45 years old and you weren't able to tell for so many years.
That's correct. Yeah.
And not until the age of 35 was any disclosure made.
That's correct.
And so, Tom Davis, you're now
61.
61 years old. You carry this secret in shame, not knowing if you be believed or and able to tell for how many years?
Over 45 years.
You know, this is 3 survivors, and most of the survivors that have been coming to us for the last 37 years in which I've been working with courageous survivors have never been able to tell and never been given permission to tell. And the law in New York never allowed them to do anything about it, much less be believed. It's time. And to Tom Davis, Bridie, Farrell, and Heather Taylor, we're deeply grateful. And to all the survivors who come forward and with whom we're working right now, we are deeply grateful. We can protect you against further harm, but protect your privacy, and you don't have to stand in a microphone with us to have your truth known and your voice heard, and to take some action to protect other kids in the future. And together we can make them do a better job. Here in the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, the Catholic bishops across the state of New York, against whom we've now sued with our partners, over 270 times in separate cases since the Child Victims Act passed, and we're just begun to work. And it's time. So thank you also. And also, we have teamed up with the firm of Robbins Kaplan to work to bring the resources to bear. And with us is Nahid Shaikh. And is there anything we need to add here today? Nahid?
I have one thing to add. As Jeff said, you don't have to be here standing in front of a microphone or in front of cameras in order to come forward. There are vehicles and mechanisms that the courts have empowered survivors with that they can proceed using a pseudonym. And bringing your case under a pseudonym is extremely courageous. It gives and inspires other survivors to come forward as well. They know they're not alone. It didn't just happen to them because they saw your lawsuit. So I just want to encourage all survivors to stand up because it's time. Thank you.
And I think it deserves to be said that the Catholic bishop in Brooklyn and their attorneys have agreed to accept the service of the process and the lawsuits that we've brought, and also they've agreed to protect the identities of the survivors that have had the courage to come forward, and agreed to protect the identities of the survivors that will come forward. They deserve to be acknowledged, given credit for that, because it's really important the survivors need to know that we're all here to help them the recovery of their power, and keeping their privacy protected is important, and the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn have agreed to do that, as have the other Archdiocese of New York and others as we proceed together. Trusha Goffe, you're one of the lawyers that working with us and the many courageous survivors across the state. What more needs to be said at this point in time?
I just want to say that the information that's in this report is possible because of the survivors who have chosen to courageously share their stories publicly, name their abusers publicly, and some of these names are being released for the first time because of lawsuits that are being brought under the Child Victims Act. Survivors who have, like those standing with us here today and those who have chosen to file lawsuits under the Child Victims Act, name their perpetrators publicly for the first time, and in that way, other survivors out there know that they are not alone, that there are being lawsuits being brought involving these perpetrators.
You're not alone. You can get help, and your secret can be shared, and you can call us at 1-800-IT'S-TIME. And thank you to Brian and Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests for organizing and supporting survivors across the state of New York and here in New York City. Thank you, Brian. Questions?
You had said
more than 275 suits have been filed since the CBA went into effect. Do you have a more specific number on that?
Yes, it's 275.
Okay. And
That's by our firms across the state against the Catholic diocese across the state. We brought other cases against other institutions and individual offenders, but against the Catholic bishops in New York and each diocese, so far our firms, our firm in partnership with Robbins Kaplan and other firms upstate have brought a total of and filed a total of 275 cases on behalf of anonymous survivors, largely against every Catholic diocese in New York under the Child Victims Act. Why so many? Because for so many years and so many decades, the survivors have had the courthouse doors shut to them by reason of the statute of limitations. And now the Child Victims Act gives them a chance to have that voice and to take that action and work with us and others to bring this reckoning to bear and the truth to be known.
can you confirm how many you brought against family members or individuals?
We're working on several, but I can't give numbers on that. Our first priority, because of the work we've been doing as a firm and the teaming we've been doing with the firms across the state, Robbins Kaplan here, was that we really felt that the perils that we have known about and have gone unrevealed have been so grave as we and I have worked in this space for 37 years and in New York for 30, and having all these offenders revealed to us privately and not being able to do anything about it, and in all these past practices, both past and present, so reckless that we felt we needed to prioritize the public safety and the grave public safety that is presented both past and present by the practices of the Catholic bishop in both concealing and not revealing what they know needed to become and is a first priority, and it comes along with the priorities against the many cases we brought against other organizations and individuals as we proceed in this path because the law's only been open a few weeks.
And the last follow-up is the 10 Brooklyn cases filed. That's separate from Ms. Taylor's and Mr. Davis?
It is. Okay. That's right. And Ms. Taylor didn't bring a suit here. She brought suit in Pittsburgh because that's where Bevilacqua was at the time as the bishop. Tom Davis brought suit under the Child Victims Act here. And I think, Tom, you used your name, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, Tom chose to use his name.
Yes.
Can I add something to that? Yes. Follow up to the question of how many individuals have been sued. I don't know if you're touching on something that's been recently in the media about lawsuits for every survivor. And so one thing that unequivocally I can say, I'm 37 years old, and sorry, old man, Jeff's been doing this as long as I've been alive, right?
That's right.
He's been going after the church since I couldn't walk, before I could skate. And so yes, we're standing up here talking specifically about the Catholic Church because that is, Jeff has more knowledge and insight into that. And so to anyone out there who happened to be wronged by their priest, by their pastor, by a nun, by a sister, anyone, like this is your guy to talk to. If your situation is unfortunately within the Jewish community, then we have someone else that's good for you too. Pick up the phone and call. We're not just turning people away. We are helping anyone that calls, as well as New York Loves Kids is a nonprofit I founded, and we're also helping to find survivors who find a representation for survivors whose abuser might not have a lot of financial means. And you will not interview any survivor. They are not going to tell you they're coming forward for the money. Like, I'm standing up here telling you I was molested, right? Nobody does that for fun. What we're doing it for is to change it, to change the way our world is going and our world works, right? And you can also do that by filing a suit and requesting information. You can also do that by filing a suit and demanding that $10 a month goes to a survivor just for that piece of accountability, right? So today, yes, it's a lot about the Catholic Church because he has more knowledge on the Catholic Church than anyone, but that doesn't say that survivors of other communities like myself, the sports community, is just left high and dry.
And I think it also needs to be emphasized that this report and the suits that we're talking about having been brought today, and the Child Victims Act against Catholic bishops, are not the only that we're bringing across the state against institution and individual offenders, the Boy Scouts and others included. But really what this is about is systemic crime, institutional cover-up and concealment and hiding secrets that have never been revealed. And so it really is an institutional, an effort by the survivors, one by one, coming forward, working with us and others to do an institutional cleanup, to make the community safer, to alert the communities to the peril that exists, not just past, but present and in real time. And so that the truth can be known and our communities can be safer, because what the survivors want first and most, and those that all call us and have been for 37 years, is saying, I don't want it to happen to others. That's why we're here today. So thank you to all you survivors. And B. Mendoza, also, please, to the Latino community and Spanish speakers, tell us what we need to know and they need to hear.
Sí, buenos días. Mi nombre es Beatriz Mendoza. Soy sobreviviente también de abuso sexual infantil. Estamos aquí junto con los sobrevivientes para informarles de que hay una nueva ley en Nueva York. La ley se abrió en agosto y tienen un año para meter una demanda. Pero estamos aquí porque es algo muy importante que deben de saber. Monsignor Otto Garcia, aquí mostramos que todavía sigue en la iglesia de Santa Teresa. Entonces, es algo que tiene que saber la comunidad porque la Diócesis de Brooklyn no está dando esta información. También tenemos aquí en este libro nombres de 200 perpetradores de la Diócesis de Brooklyn. El Diócesis de Brooklyn solamente dio 112 nombres, entonces nosotros tenemos más. Y queremos decirle a la comunidad que estamos aquí para ayudarles, no están solos. Somos defensores de víctimas de abuso sexual y queremos que por favor pidan ayuda porque no están solos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Come on, Tony.
You badass.
Yeah.
Parents would be proud.
Yeah. Yeah, they would.
Heather?
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like, man, she's like, I know. I was like, you have 1 year. I was like, oh, yeah, she's got all of it.
Give me your contact info before you go. I'm going to give it to my son, just to make sure.